I use media to connect with people a lot, and did a deal on Facebook, and heard Crystal's story here. She's over working right now and she couldn't make it tonight, but travels 25 miles from Mansfield, single mom of two, would love to live in Chelan and can't, and just expresses her frustration there. Here's a new teacher to town, father of two, married, frustrated, says, I can go elsewhere and make more and have cheaper housing. These are not new stories. You've heard them before. Here's a guest service manager at a local resort, single mom of three, makes a decent living, doesn't qualify for affordable housing, doesn't work in the ag fields, looks at $1,400 a month plus utilities and calls it ridiculous. And so she's living with her parents, and only has options in Aniat and Wenatchee that are practically viable. Here's a fellow that I know pretty well, works as a manager in town. Wife has her own business. He's been booted along as rents have continued to go up and up and up because of our very low vacancy rate. And he says at the end, I have a very real fear that we won't find a place to live come June. And then he mentions that he's got 3 kids, and the youngest is 10 years old. So my question is really, how can we house our people? And this is not just an issue of affordability. This is an issue across the board. So if you're making 40 grand a year in Chelan, you've got a problem. If you're making 50 grand a year in Chelan, you've got a problem. And I even heard from Mary Shear, and she said, my son, he's a vet. He had struggle finding a place, so a professional person like that even. So I'm going to just go through real quick the data, a little bit about what I would see as a solution, an overview of Widener's background and capacity, and then just some of the obstacles. And then again, as I mentioned, my goal would be to just sit down with staff and Widener in the new year and say, hey, can we figure out a way to put together a thing that meets the city's goals and responsibilities in terms of being a good steward of their infrastructure, but also allows us to provide opportunities for a lot of these people that we know that are living and or that are working and want to continue to live here. So there's a lot of data here. I shared some of it yesterday, but the short of it is these are the median prices for rentals, ranging from a 1-bedroom to a 4-bed, as you can see there. This is over 119 properties that are managed by Coldwell Banker. And you can see $950 on the low end to $1,700. I translated that into an hourly wage, just thinking, okay, if you put 30% aside for housing, which is the general rule of thumb, probably not followed by many in Chelan, but in an ideal world, you would need to make $18 an hour to afford that 1-bed, 1-bath apartment. And we know kind of where Chelan wages fall. And so, it goes up from there. And that, in short, is a bit of the challenge. This is obviously reflected in the vacancy rates. They say a balanced market's between 5% and 7%. Below 5, the landlord has most of the power. Above 7, there's too much supply, and the tenant has the power, quote unquote. And so you're shooting for that balanced range. And we are, well below 2%, depending on your source. And I would say, just like someone that's had a chronic limp forever and doesn't know what it's like to walk or run normally, I would say that we have chronically had low inventory in our rental stock, and that we don't know what it's like to have a healthy rental market. This is borne out with this market study that Widener did. So basically they said, is there a market for a project of the size that they're thinking? And basically what you see in the orange is the deficit need for multifamily housing. So over the last business cycle. So I don't want to get too far in the weeds, but basically they go back to the start of the last business cycle, which is roughly post-recession 2010, and then start looking at the growth of a place since then, as well as whatever new projects have come on. And so you see population is in blue as indexed on the right-hand axis. The orange is the calculation of the number of multifamily units that are needed based on that population increase. And then at the very bottom are the gray, which represents investment of new units. So 2017 is showing the Chelan View Apartments, 22, a 22, I think, units. And then we have some that are already signed up with the city for the next 2 years. And there may be, some other smaller ones that didn't catch, didn't get on the radar of the fellow doing the study. But what I want to show is that orange needs to be gone. Like a well-balanced market would have no orange, right? We would not have a deficit. And that's the reason why we have housing issues. And the reason why we hear about it on the lower end is because those are the ones that are pushed out. If you're working at the hospital, you might have to wait a little time, but you'll find a rental. And guess what? You're going to pay more than maybe that last person. And so that escalation goes. And so it's really, the folks that are making 25 grand a year and working hard that are the ones that are suffering. So how can we house our people? Just real quick summary of Widener. Privately owned, family owned business out of Kirkland, but good size. They have nearly 50,000 units nationwide. They're an owner and an operator, so they don't just build things, they also build them and manage them. And that's critical because you want a healthy culture at a project of this size. You want an operator that recognizes, hey, it's in my best interest to make sure that we screen applicants and have the right type of people here and have respect and just have a Class A thing. And if you go down to Riverside 9 in Wenatchee, which is their current operating project within an hour's drive, you'll see that. It's 280 proposed units, as I mentioned, phased in over time. Obviously, it wouldn't just pop out of the ground in that size. And the last thing I would say is that they're willing to make this long-term investment. A lot of companies don't want to come into Chelan or other secondary markets, as they're called, because it's risky. It's not a proven market, and it takes a lot of confidence to get a bank to lend on that type of an investment. Widener's able to do it because their balance sheet is just rock solid. They have a lot of assets that they can borrow against, and banks are willing to say, okay, go take your risk over there. If it goes belly up, I get my pound of flesh over here, right? And so that's really the opportunity that this company offers to Chelan. So real quick, this is just a 40-second video to give you a taste of the Riverside 9 project. It's down in Wenatchee, right by the river. This is a 1-bedroom, 1-bath model unit that they let me come in and just do a quick few shots of. Nice quality granite countertops, nice finishes throughout. This is their clubhouse or lobby. It's got a weight room and a pool. Has a pool. Oh yeah, that's pretty standard. Even after this project, Wenatchee's still deficit 1,500 units, and so Widener's doing 2 more projects to help meet that demand, and it won't meet that demand. And so they're nice units, right? And they're certainly not going to be the answer for everything in Chelan. But what they will do is they will just take the relief valve off of this pressure. Those orange bars I showed you earlier, that's just pressure pushing up or pushing out, the folks that are the most challenged. This is going to offer a spectrum of housing opportunities for them.
Yeah, what are the rents at Riverside 9? How do they fit into your...
I know at Riverside 9, they've had what I would call the Chelan View Apartment Syndrome. Namely, you put a few apartments into a market that's underserved, and you by no means satiate that market, and those rents go up, right? So that's what's going to happen, in my opinion, with smaller projects here in Chelan. Now, that's why they're doubling down there, because they say, hey, there's a market here to be met. And so if there's one thing I would say tonight is that let's not be afraid of of the standard market of capitalism to help provide what this community needs. We definitely need some affordability structures, and I applaud the mayor for his leadership in that, and other folks. But that's a minor, it's a percentage of the overall problem. So I would say that they're higher than they probably should be down there for most folks.
Maybe I could just chime in. Listening to the Widener part, they don't get anything fixed, so they go market. So if they have 20 open units, they'll lower those units.
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah.
correct?
And-
I mean, there's no set number.
And folks have asked me, well, what would these rents be? And I would say they're limited by the market. And I have a slide a little bit later. I have this, hopefully this will be good for the rate study conversation this coming year, is we have two economies in Chelan, kind of the 425 Chelan economy and the 509 Chelan economy. The 425 Chelan economy is fueled by the median income of Sammamish. I just picked that. It's $153,000 a year. The 509 Chelan economy is fueled by our median income, which is $49,000. And so these are units for the 509 Chelan economy, and they will inherently, if you put enough units into the market, be limited by what people can pay, right? It's not a place that someone from Seattle's necessarily going to want to go. I mean, it's cool. It's up by, I'm going to show you right now, but it's a little outside of that 425 Chelan economy. So
would you just kind of in summary of that, though, Guy, you're not claiming that this project is going to immediately solve the affordable housing issue. That's not the target market here. It's called market rate housing, correct?
that's right. Yeah.
That's what Mike's talking about.
And
rates float based on what the market is.
Yeah, exactly.
So more than likely, this project's going to find itself in that same 1,200 challenged zone as your slide number 2.
I would say that affordability is driven by availability.
If we can put more units in place, it will help the affordable
Eventually.
matrix.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
If we ever reach that point. Now, my understanding is Riverside 9 started at 1,400, is that correct? And it's now closer to 2,000?
No, so they have everything from a studio to a 2-bed, 2-bath. And I want to say their studio is reflective of our prices, so about 900, and it's 1,500, 1,600 on the upper end. So I mean, it changes, right? That was the last data that I got. So but I think availability.
So why don't you finish, and then we'll ask you questions, and then we're going to move on.
Sounds good. Real quick here, we're just going to, for everybody's reference, go into Apple Blossom Center. So here's Walmart right out here. Here's the new clinic. Here's where the hospital's going to go. And right over here, right next to the ball fields, is the 10-acre parcel that is proposed for the project. And this is just the first sketch that was done. A couple access points, one here, one here, one here. Pool in the middle, little complex, just similar to what you saw at Riverside 9. Some nice units here with views out over the ball fields. Probably cheaper units here, that are facing Walmart, but definitely an area that is on par with some of the other structures out there in terms of massing and things. And the nice thing is, and this is kind of getting to that conversation that I hope to have with the city in January, these folks want to be good community players. So, could I get them to throw a couple $100,000 at trails and, help connect Apple Blossom Center with downtown Chelan, as an example? And this is just, one portion of a future trail. Maybe, right?
Okay, now we're warming up.
Well, yeah. And
After
so,
walking that trail.
yeah.
Guy, do you have what the average house price is up in Sunny?
So I sold a home up there for $349 for a 1,800 square foot home in September, and dirt cost is pushing 80 grand now for a lot, and 150 square foot for construction costs on top of that. So you're starting out. I think the days of getting something in there at 3 1/4 are fastly, they're quickly going. Yeah,
Right.
yeah. So, and I think that's again, different subject, but function of availability. Yeah. So coming down the home stretch, a few obstacles. I'm just going to push against us here a little bit. Size, a large complex, out of character for Chelan, right? I get it. Location, we want to infill in the downtown. I don't want to see more development out there at Apple Blossom Center. I get it. Market rate, we want affordable housing. We don't want this market rate stuff. I get it. All of that is very valid. I would humbly submit that the massing of units out at Apple Blossom Center between the hospital and the Walmart is compatible with a project like this. So there probably is some compatibility there. It's just sort of the shock of things. Number two, I would say that it's not an either or, it's an and situation. And this rate structure that we're doing in 018 can very much incentivize multifamily infill. That's not what it's doing right now. And so will Apple Blossom Center grow? Yes. Will downtown Chelan always be the coolest place on earth? Yes. These are not mutually exclusive. And the market rate I've spoken about. Sewer and water, we need to talk about this as a community. There's our number today to do the project, $3 million. There's our number as of January 1st. It'll be just under $4 million. Those are the numbers if you did it in any of the neighboring communities. I know it's apples and oranges, but getting to my argument about 509 Chelan and 425 Chelan, if we have a rate structure that can more or less carry the load with the 425 Chelan, we need to calibrate to that, but we also need a rate structure that doesn't create these rockets that never get built, that are fueled by a little median income of 49 grand, because there's just no, it just won't get off the ground. And that's, I would argue, what's happened in the last 10 years in terms of the lack of multifamily housing. So coming down the home stretch, we have an acute need. I feel this is the right land, the right seller, the right buyer, and I'm just requesting that we, could get together with the city staff to basically talk about a connection agreement that would be a combination of paid fees, in-kind contributions, and a look at the actual use calculations. And I've got that. I can share it with Dwayne. Their units in Riverside 9 and Moses Lake use about 0.3 of an ERU, and they've got all the data. Currently, our rate structure is set up to go, 1-to-1, and that's a big discrepancy. So,
Is it what I have a hard? You mentioned that number, but I have a hard time understanding. If I've got a 2-bedroom, 2-bath house, and I have 5 people living there, for example, why would it be different than a 2-bedroom, 2-bath house, single family?
Apartment?
well, the biggest,
You're still flushing toilets, doing laundry.
yeah, biggest one is, if you've ever tried to keep anything green, is irrigation.
Grass. Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing.
So you're talking about 1/3. You're saying that a multi-unit uses 1/3.
That's the data from their complexes. Yeah,
Washer, dryer.
yeah, yeah. Those would be. Yeah. So I have a deadline of February 15th. That's my goal.